Good morning, Portola High School ceramics classes. If you're watching this video, that means that you are at home and you are going to learn how to make your first project in ceramics. So this particular project is the imprinted texture tile project. So we're going to do 3 tiles in total, and the first one is imprinted textures, and those are made with patterns here. So they're pushed in. You can see that this is flat, and then they're actually pushed in to the clay surface. Alright. So what I'm asking for on this project is a 5 by 5, so 5 inches both directions, so square tile. The edges should be nice and straight, okay? And I want 3 patterns repeated at least 3 times, okay? So on this tile, we have these small dots going this way, and then we have these large circles going this way. That same pattern is repeated again, and then here is a new one here. There's like these little, almost like crown-looking textures. So these repeated patterns can be found going through this at least 3 times. Okay. So another example of this. Okay, this is in a diagonal format. Okay. You could do it horizontally or vertically as well. You could also do a radial pattern where the patterns are repeated in like a circle going out. Okay, notice here we have the moon shapes, the circles, and the triangles. And they also added these nice dividing stripes in there, which are totally up to you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to begin making your tile. So first off, you're going to start with your block of clay, and we're going to access that clay. It should be a completely fresh bag. In order to remove the amount of clay that you would like to use, you can use one of these wire cutters. Okay, so wire cutters are just used to cut the clay off, so let's do that. So you can wrap it around your fingers, and then we're just going to cut through here, and you have your clay there. All right? So once you have your piece of clay taken off the block there, you want to make sure you didn't get too much clay first of all. Okay, so I've got an amount of clay here which might translate into like the size of a grapefruit or a large orange. Okay, and I'm just gonna start to pound this with my hands using an open hand. Okay, just kind of pound it down a little bit flatter. Okay, I'm gonna set it on my workboard here. Now I can start to hit that down even further. Okay, and I'm just flattening it out. So what I'm trying to do is convince the clay to begin to get flatter like our tile here. Okay, we also want it a square format. We're going for a square, so we do want to hit it more than one direction. I'm sorry if this is kind of loud on your end. Okay, so I have a pretty flat shape here. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to set this down, and I'm going to take my dowels. So these dowels are each the same size. They're 3/8 inch, 3/8 of an inch, and we're going to put them along the sides of the clay here. Okay. So from here, what I'm going to do now is with my rolling pin completely on top of the clay, I'm going to begin to start rolling. Okay? So very important in this step that you don't do it all at once. You want to just start it. Notice how it's getting longer this way. So I'm going to flip and also turn. Okay, so I might need to adjust my dowels. Again, start rolling back and forth, go all the way back and forth. Alright, so it's not completely flat quite yet, so I'm going to pick it up, flip it, and then also rotate it again. And you want to repeat this process until when you're rolling over the clay, you no longer feel or see the clay moving. Okay. And if you notice right here, I know that this is excess clay out here. I'm not going to use all that. So what I'm going to do is take a needle tool, and I'm just going to cut away this extra clay so I don't have issues with it going off my board here. So I think about one more time and we'll be there. So I'm going to roll out. Notice how the clay is no longer moving. I can push as hard as I want. The clay is no longer moving, so it is completely flat and the same width as this dowel here. Now if you're rolling and your dowel comes off, then you can push past that width. So that's why you want to make sure your rolling pin is on top of the dowels. So once I have my piece of clay here that's been rolled out, completely flat, no blemishes, no cracks, I want to take a ruler and I'm going to place it along one of the edges here. And I want to make sure I give myself enough room. Okay. And we're making 5 by 5 tiles. So I want to start at 0 here. And I want to go all the way to 5. So I'm just going to mark it for now. I'm not going to cut all the way. Okay. So I made a mark all the way to 5. I'm going to make little notches just so I know where these end exactly. Okay. So from here, the first one's easy. Your ruler is straight, and that first line is going to be straight. However, we don't want to guess after this point. So instead of guessing, I'm going to use this right angle tool here, triangle tool. So this is a perfect 90-degree right angle. So I'm going to place this along that straight edge, and you want to line it up carefully. And from here, I went to the corner, that 5-inch corner, and I can just make a straight line all the way up here. So now I have my 2 sides. 2 of my 4 sides are ready to go. So what I want to do now is take my ruler again. And I just made a long line there. So I'm now going to come back in at 5. So I started at 5 here. So that means when I get to 0 on this end, that's going to be 5. And we're just going to rinse and repeat this process. So from here, I already have my measurement. And I just got to make sure that my lines are lined up with the tool. Okay. And again, I can make this last cut here. So once you pass the tool, notice how my my needle tool kind of cut down. That's okay. All this over here is actually, this is all excess clay here. Okay. Oh, I guess I didn't cut that yet. Alright, so this is all excess here. And then you're going to want to repeat that for the last side. So over here, you're just going to flip your tool around, and all you have to do is line up this straight edge at the top, up here, with the mark that you made down here. You're going to line them up and then cut down this edge. You don't even have to measure the last one. So once you've cut all the excess clay off, what we want to do now is take a straight edge tool, and this tool works really great for the next two steps. So this is just your average, tongue depressor, thin piece of wood. So I'm going to go around the outsides, and I'm going to just paddle all these nice and flat. Sometimes the edges get a little weird during the cutting, and we're just going to paddle those flat. Okay? We want to be really careful now, especially if you're working on a table and not a workboard like this. You want to then just kind of wiggle the sides, kind of pick it up gently. Okay? And that we're just trying to convince the clay, all right, enough sleeping. We're going to pick you up and flip you over. Okay? During that process, your fingers may have made some marks. You can go back in and tidy up those edges. So I notice on this side I've got a funky edge here where it kind of curves in, but it looks okay on the other side. So I'm going to use this as my back. So on the back we want to do what is called scoring. Okay? So scoring can be done with this tool or carefully with a fettling knife, but we want to go in and make some mild indentations. So just gently rock the tool back and forth and make some indentations. We want them, you don't want to go any further than half of the thickness of the tile. So I'm just barely making marks here. So what this does is this allows air to get under the tile and lets the tile dry evenly. Okay? So while this is drying, we need everything to dry at the same rate. If it dries at a different rate, let's say this side gets more air than this side, then one side will shrink faster and then it will warp, and you'll start to see your straight edges are no longer there. So once you have your scoring lines in there, you can do them going straight across, or you can do them diagonally like I did. Once you have those, gently flip your tile back over. And anytime you do that, I would recommend just straightening up your edges. You're being graded partially on your craftsmanship, which is your attention to detail. All these little sorts of things. So I've got some crispy edges here at the end. I'm even going to take a slightly wet finger and just go over these edges to clean them up. Okay, so now it's time to create textures and patterns. Okay, so when you come into class, I recommend that you bring some tools or old jewelry, anything that's going to leave a texture of some sort. I have some things like this little earring. Don't worry, nobody's worn them. And you can then press these into the clay. So in order to make sure that your patterns are being applied evenly, what I would recommend doing is using a straight edge. Again, this tool works perfectly. And you can do one of two things. You could eyeball it and look at your tool, say, does it fit right there? Then yes, I'm going to push it in. So I'm just applying some pressure. Okay, I've pushed that tool, or I've pushed that little jewelry piece in there, and I pull it out, and you can see I've made this little mark there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now, this is my artistic choice, I'm going to flip that tool around, or this piece of jewelry. I guess it's a tool. And I'm going to continue doing this alternating moon shape for my first pattern. Remember, you need 3 patterns in total. Okay. So I'm using this as a guide because I want this to be straight all the way across. If you want to be really sure that you're doing everything straight, which is a good idea, you can measure, okay, how much room did that take? And you can make little marks. So mine took about a ½ inch here, and I can just go off to the edge over here, and I can make a little notch just big enough for me to see. And I can keep doing that all the way down, and then I know that when I continue to make these patterns, I can then keep going down as a guide. So I'll work on this and I'll come back when I've got some more done. So I've made some progress here. You can see I've continued my patterns, so I've got this moon pattern, and then I'm actually using this bracelet. This is an African bracelet that I purchased several years back, and it doesn't fit my wrist, so what I did is I turned it into a tool. So if you're ever going to use something that is of this format, what you need to do is gently push it in just enough to get it kind of stuck onto the clay. Make sure you don't want to move it around too much, just keep it still. And then now I'm just going to go through and gently press it in a little bit further. You have to be careful towards the edges that you're not pushing too hard, otherwise you can actually smush the tile too much. Make sure it's staying straight. Okay, so I think it's all in there. It feels nice and secure. So what I'm going to do now is just gently hold the side and pull it out, and you have your repeating pattern there. So jumping forward a little bit, so something to point out here, I started this circle pattern here, and it starts to push the edges out. So what I'm going to do is just sure up the edges again with this tool. And then another thing to point out about the motif, the pattern that's happening here. So I started it just at the edge here, and I continued at certain intervals, and then I got to this point here, and there's this empty area right here, if you can see it. So one thing I'll recommend is you don't want to force it in there. So there's this certain interval that I'm working with. Every 3 of these small circles up here, I'm adding a big circle. So it just so happens that maybe just the very edge would be showing right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fake that it's happening again, and I'm just barely going to put a little circle on there. You don't want to try and squeeze a whole new indentation right there, because it'll look off balance. So by putting that on the very edge, it kind of smushed my clay down, so I'm going to paddle that in, and I'm going to continue working.